in this chapter, we're going to put the piping on to the yoke, and then we're also going to sandwich the front and back pieces between the two yoke pieces, the upper material and the lining. Now we're going to put the yoke on the front and the back. So I need my two fronts, my back, and my two yoke pieces, and I have cut this in white as well, so it's nice and bright. I wouldn't have wanted it in the same color as we've discussed before because it makes it a little bit darker, so I've got a white lining. The first step is to sew my front yoke to the front piece, and we want the seam to be visible here because that is my lining. It's underneath, right? And then we're going to have the other one over the top. All right, and I'm going to show you a little trick for that as well. If you use the piping, it makes it a little easier. So I've pinned this in already, so let's show you this. So what we want to do is just simply grab this. Now the seam allowance is 1 centimeter, so make sure that the rough edges here are exactly on top of each other in that area. They will only be there in this one point. Yeah, and then it will overshoot. So you need to make sure it sits exactly there. Go to the other end and do exactly the same, but this time the check overshoots a little bit. Make sure you have that 1 centimeter seam allowance there. Again, your rough edges need to sit on top of each other. Brilliant. And then you can see it will fit in. Now don't stretch this like that, but work it in by rounding your fabric in. Yeah, like that. Round it in so the edges stay on top of each other and they don't end up overshooting. So when you do it like this, it's really easy. As you can see, the white would now overshoot if you just didn't watch what you're doing. So edge to edge. Edge to edge here as well. Don't forget, this is on the diagonal and it will stretch and it won't look very nice if you just pull it to fit. You need to be very gentle with this. There you go, edge to edge, and it will all fit in beautifully. There we go. Wonderful. And that's all in. So now that's the front done. The next step is to add the back to it. And the back is a little bit easier, of course, because it's straight. So open this out. We do the same thing again. What we want to have is our seam standing up towards each other, right? So first pin goes in at the center back. I'm pinning this in from that side and I go to the other side here. I make sure again that where my seam allowance is, the rough edges are exactly on top of each other. And now I can sew these in. I can pop over to the sewing machine and do that. And here we've got to be very, very careful actually. We don't want any of this to push out at all. So we want to really stick with what we've pinned and move the fabric around so that it always feeds in straight to my presser foot. Stick to your seam allowance. That turns out really, really nice. Now we're going to sew it back to the back of the yoke. My right hand usually holds the fabric like this with a thumb underneath it and then the full hand on here, the other 4 fingers, and that keeps it nice and flat. And my left hand makes sure that there's no pleats underneath it. Generally, I like to press my seam allowances flat because that makes it easier to iron them over. It's not always necessary, but it's one of those habits that's quite good to get into. You want to iron your seam allowances flat on here as well. Now we're going to iron the seam up. I'm just holding it a little bit taut. That looks beautiful. And the back yoke, of course, as well. We want to iron the seam into the yoke. Because I'm using the piping, it's actually a little bit easier. What I'm going to do is put my piping on already to my little curve here and across the back. And because I'm doing that, it will make it easier to put this together. So all you beginners here, this is a little bit of a simplification for you. Just make very sure that you stick with the rough edges on top of each other, right? That you don't slip. Once I've sewn this in, and I'm going to do this close to the edge, and I turn it, I can press this and I get a really, really neat edge. And now I'm also going to put my piping onto the back yoke. Straight across. Just make sure that you line up all your rough edges. And now I can sew all this in as well. And it's very important to actually really hit it here fairly close to your piping. That's really important. To use the piping, I have got a sort of zipper come piping foot come everything foot. If you have a piping foot, well, by all means use it. But if you don't, then you can use your zipper foot that comes with your machine, and we're just moving the needle over. And I want to show it with equipment that everybody has available. So I think you will probably have one of those on your sewing machine. Hold it nice and taut. Make sure that the rough edges stay on top of each other and sew all the way to the end. Now it gets interesting. We're going to do the curves. So secure your stitches first. And now we want to make absolutely sure that we don't let anything slip over, so we get this beautiful western curve. Oh, that's beautiful. Now we're going to do the same on the other side. Take your time with this, don't rush it, because if you're rushing this, it won't come out well. So nice and slow, edge to edge, and you'll get really perfect, beautiful result. Before we iron the edge over, we want to cut back the piping, not the seam allowance here, first just the piping. And now I can also cut back the shell fabric so that we have it in stages. Next, we're going to iron this over, and it's going to give us an absolutely beautiful result. Just follow the piping. Look at that. See how nice the curve comes out doing it like that. So you can't really go wrong with this if you work tidily. It's like everything. Now we're going to do the same on our piping on the back, and we're going to cut it back in stages. And now we can also iron that one over. And now we can cut off our ends. Now we know exactly where they sit, and they've been ironed up. One more thing, we're not quite done here. Grab a pin, and what you want to do is pull out a little bit of this piping, because we don't really want all this in our seam allowance. It will make it really thick. So I'm going to grab this piping, and I hope it comes out, and I haven't gone in there. And what you want to do is cut off a little bit more than 1 centimeter, and then you let it go back in. There we go. And then the seam allowance is going to be nice and flat. And we repeat this everywhere, of course. Makes your life so much easier. This really is good. I didn't used to do this when I first started sewing, and I used to have these really thick seams. This is the way to do it. There we go. Now we're going to have really nice flat seams here on the side. Now you can just grab your yoke and your blouse, and we're just going to put the yoke over the top here. Now this is quite a simple method to do this, because you can just line it all up really neatly, and if there's any mistake underneath it, you can, you know, if this is a bit higher up, a bit lower, it doesn't really matter, because what we're going to do is top stitch this together here. So make sure that you cover the line to make it fit, and that makes life so much easier for anyone that's a beginner that is worried about getting this right. And I'm also going to pin on the back here, same as I did the front. Just make sure that your neckline is on top of each other, you know, from the lining and the upper material. You can also put a pin here, just make sure that nothing moves. And then you can pin the other side down as well, and that way you have guaranteed a perfect fit. I can go over to my sewing machine and just top stitch this on. Wow, that's going to be really pretty. It's very important that I keep the same distance here from the seam to where I'm stitching. So in all honesty, I do look at my needle, I do look at the edge that I want to line up with. It's a bit of a mix of both, so I'm going really slowly, and I'm making sure that the center of my presser foot has the same distance to the edge. That's more or less what I do when I sew along. My foot is clear, so I can see through. That is really, really good. So I can just see what I'm doing very well. I do have to say, I do love these feet. I don't like the ones which are completely metal, because you can't really do that. You can't really see through and see where you're going and sewing, and it makes your life easier if it's like that. There we go. I'll take it very, very slowly. I don't want to mess this up. Especially since I'm never quite in front of my sewing. I'll always have to be slightly sideways. It's not so easy. So it's because the camera is right in front of it. There we go. And round. Brilliant. we do the same on the back. There we go. Here, it was actually really easy to just look at my distance from the side. Where it was those extreme curves, that's not so easy, and you just have to kind of look at your needle as well and where it hits the fabric.